They told me I'd be in row 14, near the service station, said it like they were doing me a favor. The wedding coordinator didn't bother lifting her eyes, and my daughter-in-law, Lila, gave a tight little smile that felt like a slap. My family can't afford to lose face, she murmured. My son, Daniel, stood beside her. Silent. Head bowed. Not a word for his own mother. 10 years a widow. 40 years raising a child alone. And at my only son's wedding, I was placed behind the photographers and the waitstaff, like a prop nobody needed. I didn't cry. I lifted my chin, my old navy dress brushing the marble floor like a final dignity. I walked toward the last row as if the humiliation were something I could step over. The hall glittered, chandeliers like falling stars, aisle drenched in white roses, champagne flowing as if money were oxygen. I sat down quietly, feeling smaller than the chair beneath me. Then the seat beside mine shifted. A hand, warm, steady, covered my trembling fingers. Let's pretend we arrived together, a man's voice whispered. I turned. Silver hair, midnight blue suit, calm confidence, and eyes I hadn't seen in nearly 50 years. Rowan. My first love. The one I believed life had erased. He leaned back casually, as if he belonged beside me. As if I hadn't just been shoved to the edge of my son's new world. Front row guests began to stare. Whispers trailed like smoke. Who is he? He looks important. Is that the groom's mother with him? Shame evaporated so fast it startled me. Up front, Daniel glanced over, and when he saw Rowan's hand on mine, his face drained of color. Lila stiffened, jaw tightening, her mother's pearls nearly rattling with outrage. Rowan murmured, "Smile. They're looking again." So I did. And the room shifted, just slightly, but unmistakably. If you love real emotional stories, hit subscribe, we post one every day. The ceremony blurred into music and vows, but nothing felt the same. I wasn't the woman in row 14 anymore, at least not in their eyes. When the applause faded, Rowan leaned close. We finally meet again, Evelyn. I almost forgot how to breathe. His eyes were the same impossible blue I once memorized. Rowan. My voice barely formed his name. Call me Ro, he said softly, just like I used to. We slipped out of the reception and into the garden where lavender brushed the path and evening gold lit his face. We walked slowly, like the past might shatter if we stepped too hard. I looked for you, he began. 4 years. Sent letters. Called. I waited. I never got any, I whispered. He stopped dead, shock cutting through his features. Not one. My mother kept them from me, I said, shame and understanding hitting at once. She erased your messages. She said you didn't care. That you'd chosen money over everything. Rowan's face crumpled, age slipping away to reveal the young man who once swore he'd build a life with me. I went to your house in 78. Then again 2 years later. They told me you'd moved on. I exhaled, years rearranging themselves in my chest. I thought you left. He shook his head with a pained smile. Evelyn. I never married. I couldn't make myself love someone who wasn't you. The wind carried lavender across my senses. I closed my eyes. I loved my late husband. He was kind. Safe. But he never truly saw me. And I lived half a life because I couldn't let go of you, Rowan answered gently. We sat on a stone bench near a pond glowing with sunset. He took out an old photograph, faded, edges softened by time. A young woman laughing into the sun. Me. I've carried this since 1974. My breath caught. I thought you'd have thrown it away. You don't throw away the one thing that kept you hopeful, he said. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Some nights, I dreamed of the old Italian place where I stole olives from your plate. Rowan chuckled, rich and warm. And I pretended not to notice until you blushed. We sat together, the past settling gently between us, not heavy anymore, just real. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Seen fully. Seen deeply. Seen as the woman I had been, and the woman I could still become. Row 14 was behind me now. Completely. Evelyn watched the soft glow of the restaurant move across Rowan Hale's face as he spoke, the city lights reflected in the windows behind him. The world felt gentler here, quieter than the wedding chaos they'd just left. Softer, somehow, because he was sitting across from her. My life went in a direction I never expected, Rowan said after a long thoughtful pause. I built a company, dealt with governors, shook hands with people who thought they owned the world. And in rooms full of power, all I could think about was the girl who used to sit on her front steps, reading Whitman to me like the words were hers. Evelyn lowered her gaze, her throat tightening. Rowan, don't say things like that. We're too old to pretend life works the way it did when we were young. He smiled, that quiet, steady kind of smile he'd always had. No, Evelyn. We don't need to be young. We just need to choose the next 20 years with courage. His words settled in her chest like something long buried finding its pulse again. For a moment, she looked into the pond outside the window. Reflected there were two older people, weathered, changed, scarred, but still capable of something bright. They sat for a while, comforted by the silence between them, until swift footsteps and sharp voices echoed through the dining terrace. Evelyn turned just in time to see Daniel and Lila rushing toward the table, expressions twisted with a frantic urgency that didn't belong at any celebration, much less a wedding. Mom, Daniel said, stopping short, breath tight. We need to talk. Now. Evelyn stayed seated. Rowan didn't flinch. Lila pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Rowan, her tone slicing through the air. Who is this? Why is he here? This is my wedding day, and we can't have unknown people causing. Rowan rose before she could finish, adjusting his jacket with calm precision. I'm someone who mattered a great deal to Evelyn. And someone who, at the very least, knows how a mother should be treated. The word struck harder than volume ever could. Daniel swallowed. Lila stilled. There's been a misunderstanding, Daniel said quickly, hands shaking. Mom, the seating chart, there was confusion, that's all. A confusion or a decision? Evelyn asked quietly. He didn't answer. Lila stepped in, her voice dipped in sugar and ice. Evelyn, you're taking this too personally. Our family has a reputation to maintain. We can't risk. Rowan's gaze cut clean through her composure. If your reputation depends on demeaning someone's mother, you're not maintaining anything worth keeping. Lila's face blanched. Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Rowan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. And since we're all speaking plainly, he said, sliding one hand casually into his pocket, my firm, Hale and Mercer, finalized an acquisition 2 weeks ago. A building on Michigan Avenue, the headquarters of Ashford Realty Group. The blood drained from both Daniel's and Lila's faces. Victoria Ashford's empire lived inside that building. What? Lila whispered. No, that's impossible. The ink dried last Friday, Rowan replied calmly. Saw the Ashford logo on the wedding banners. Quite a coincidence. Silence stormed through the terrace. Daniel stared like he no longer knew which side of the world he stood on. Rowan turned to Evelyn, his voice soft again. It's been a long day. Would you like to leave with me? Evelyn rose, steady and unafraid. Yes. I would. You're leaving? Lila demanded, outraged. We still need family portraits. Evelyn paused only long enough to answer, family includes respect. Without it, a picture is just ink. Daniel reached forward, a plea sitting on his tongue. But this time, Evelyn didn't break, didn't apologize, didn't shrink. I'm not something for you to place or hide anymore, she said softly. From here on, I choose my own seat. Rowan offered his hand. She took it. Whispers bloomed behind them, curious, reverent, almost stunned. Is that Rowan Hale? With the groom's mother? If the Ashfords crossed her. God help them. Evelyn didn't look back. The evening breeze carried lavender and lake air as they walked toward Rowan's car. Each step stripped away a little more of the shame she'd been taught to hold. At the door, Rowan opened it for her gently, like he always had half a lifetime ago. I'm sorry, he said softly. If I'd known today was Daniel's wedding, I would have found you sooner. Evelyn smiled, small but real. Everything happens when it's meant to. They drove through the dimming light to Lakeview Terrace, a quiet restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. Glass walls shimmered. Music hummed low. Rowan chose a window seat without asking, like he remembered everything. You always liked the view, he said. Even when you said you didn't. He ordered her meal as if no time had passed, lasagna, capris, no onions, a modest glass of Italian red. When the server walked away, she stared at him in disbelief. You remembered, she whispered. I never forgot. Dinner was unhurried. Evelyn told him about her life, her students, the long years caring for Harold, the silence that followed. Rowan listened like every detail mattered. You know, Rowan said softly, obligation is the coldest version of love. It wears the right face but carries an empty heart. Evelyn laughed sadly. That was Daniel toward the end. Calls on schedule, 3 questions, and then he was gone. Rowan's expression softened with something like understanding. Children don't always realize the cost of the shoulders they stand on. And you? She asked quietly. Did you ever find someone? People came into my life, he admitted. But I never could put down what I still carried for you. Her breath caught. The wine reflected gold against his eyes. He leaned forward, not urgent, just honest. Evelyn, we can't rewrite the years behind us. But we can choose what we do with the ones ahead. Her phone buzzed, 7 missed calls from Daniel, 3 frantic messages from Lila. Who is Rowan Hale? Where are you? Do you know what kind of man he is? She turned the phone over. They're already digging, she murmured. As they should, Rowan said simply. People who mistreat others should worry about the consequences. Evelyn laughed for real this time. You're still as confident as ever. No, he said gently, just certain that people eventually face what they sow. He lifted his glass. So tell me what you want. Not as a mother. Not as a widow. Not as someone who got pushed to row 14. As Evelyn. She met his eyes. For once, no fear shadowed her answer. I want something new. Something that belongs to me. Rowan smiled. Then let's start there. After dinner, he paid without argument. You can get the next one, he teased. If you don't cancel. She shook her head. I won't. For the first time in years, she knew she meant it. Later, as the lake shimmered in silver and gold, Evelyn realized something simple and profound. The woman they'd tried to bury in the back row had found her way to the front of her own life. At the door, the lake breeze slipped in, cold, clean, and tinged with that faint mineral scent that always made Chicago nights feel honest. I pulled my wrap closer and watched the city lights flicker in Rowan's eyes. Thank you for dinner, I said softly. And, for coming. If you hadn't walked to row 14, I'm not sure our paths ever would have crossed again. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me with the kind of steadiness that said more than words ever could. I didn't add anything. Not because I lacked thoughts, but because everything I wanted to say felt too heavy or too fragile to release into the air. I nodded and turned away. The cab I climbed into was warm, dim. My phone buzzed, for missed calls from Daniel. I let the screen glow for a breath, then muted the notifications and slipped the phone into my purse. That night, I stayed by the window overlooking Lake Michigan. The moonlight shimmered on the water in long silver lines. For the first time in years, something inside me felt light. Unburdened. Seen. Tomorrow, I'd have to face Daniel and Lila and all the tangled pieces of our world. But not tonight. Tonight belonged to peace. To remembering that I was still a person with worth. And somewhere in the city, I imagined Rowan standing near the lake as well, looking at the same horizon, the past finally loosening its grip on both of us. 3 days later, I was watering the porch plants when my phone rang. "Mom," Daniel said, trying to sound steady, though strain leaked through every word. "Are you free tonight? Lila and I want to take you to dinner. At River House." River House, the kind of place you needed reservations a week in advance. They weren't reaching out of love. Not after everything. I wiped my hands and smiled slightly. "Of course. I can go." He exhaled like he'd just solved a crisis. That evening, the restaurant glowed with candlelight, gold shimmering off polished wood and crystal glasses. I arrived in a simple blush dress and the pearl earrings Harold had given me years ago. A server walked me to the private room. Inside, Lila was already seated, wearing a designer dress I recognized from a magazine cover. Daniel sat beside her, tired around the edges, scrolling his phone. Lila stood with a brilliant smile. "Evelyn, you look lovely tonight." "Glowing, actually." "Good company can do that, don't you think?" I offered her a mild smile. "You're right, good company, good choices, good manners. They always show." Daniel froze halfway through lifting his water glass. Lila's smile twitched. We sat. The room was beautiful, but it felt staged. Like a meeting disguised with linen napkins. Under the table, Rowan quietly slid his hand into mine. He sat beside me, composed, gaze steady. Not a show of support, just quiet reassurance. The server poured wine and slipped out. Lila began with small talk, vacations, charity boards, upcoming events. Her voice glided through sentences like she'd practiced in the mirror. It wasn't conversation. It was strategy. I listened, offering small nods when needed. When the main course arrived, Wagyu with truffle, Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom. I wanted to talk about work." I lifted my wine. "Yours or mine?" He faltered. Lila stepped in quickly, her tone soft but sharpened at the edges. "Whitmore Capital recently purchased the building where our company's headquarters are. We thought maybe, with your connection, we could request keeping the current lease terms. It would help everyone." Rowan set down his knife, movements unhurried. "Business is business, Mrs. Ashford. I don't allow personal relationships to interfere with fair decisions." A muscle jumped in Lila's jaw. Daniel forced a smile. "But things can be flexible, right? If both sides want them to be." Rowan's eyes hardened just a touch. "I'm flexible with people who act with respect." The words drifted out softly, yet the room went silent. I straightened. "Before we talk leases or contracts, maybe we should address something else first. Respect." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "Mom, I know there was a misunderstanding at the wedding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said gently. "It was a choice. You chose to seat me behind the service area." You chose silence when Lila said my presence would embarrass her family. Lila spoke fast. Evelyn, I didn't mean harm. I wanted the ceremony flawless. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. I met her eyes evenly. Lila, are you sorry because you regret it, or because you're facing consequences? Her smile faltered. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. You once promised your father you'd never make me feel unwelcome, I told Daniel quietly. But that day, I've never felt more like a stranger. He bowed his head, words drying in his throat. Rowan spoke softly, but his voice carried. Whitmore Capital respects integrity. Those who act right will be treated right. I trust you both understand. They did. Lila regained her polite face. Of course. We only hoped the family could work together so no one suffers. Family isn't a business deal, I replied. I'm not asking for cooperation. I'm asking for respect. The rest of dinner flowed in stiff, polished silence. Even the jazz drifting from the hallway felt distant. When dessert plates were cleared, Rowan stood and pulled out my chair. I think it's time to go, Evelyn. No reason for anyone to mistake this for a negotiation. I turned to Daniel. I hear your apology. But forgiveness takes time. It can't be rushed. He nodded, eyes shimmering. Lila pressed her lips tight, unable to hide her displeasure. I hope, I said, that when either of you say, I'm sorry, it's because you truly mean it, not because you fear losing status. Neither answered. I left with Rowan, feeling steady. Stronger. On the drive home, the city burned bright, towers rising like glass monuments against the night. You held your ground, Rowan said softly. I'm proud of you. I smiled faintly at the passing lights. Maybe I finally learned that silence can be stronger than speeches. He squeezed my hand gently. That night, I didn't feel exhausted. Not even close. Walking away without shrinking felt like the first breath after years spent underwater. The next morning, while making tea, the doorbell rang, slow, deliberate. The kind of ring meant to summon, not request. I opened the door. Victoria Ashford stood on my porch, immaculate in a cream cashmere coat and a string of pearls. Her smile was pleasant, but every inch of her was calculation. Evelyn, she said sweetly, I hope I'm not intruding. You're not. Please come in. Her eyes swept across my living room, at the hand-repaired clock, the wooden chair from a yard sale, the framed memories on the wall. I recognized that look. The wealthy often mistook simplicity for insufficiency. Charming, she murmured. Cozy. A bit modest. I poured tea and slid a cup her way. She set her handbag down, clicked it open, and placed a check between us. $50,000. This isn't a bribe, she said calmly. Think of it as mutual benefit. If you persuade Mr. Hale to keep Devon and Reed's lease unchanged, this is yours. I stared at the check, letting silence stretch. Are you bribing me? I asked. She smiled lightly. I call it an arrangement. Smart people avoid ugly words. I lifted the check. The paper was thick, expensive. Then I tore it cleanly into 4 pieces. Victoria's eyes widened. My dignity, I said, isn't for sale. Her voice cooled. Be careful, Evelyn. Influence matters in this world. Your choices affect your son, his future, everything. I walked to the door and unlatched it. A few days ago, maybe you could have frightened me. Today? No. She stood there, stunned. Keep your influence, I said. I'll keep my integrity. You're making a mistake, she warned. If staying true to myself is a mistake, I'll live with it. She left in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and disapproval. I looked at the torn check on the saucer. Money only mattered if I let it define me. I swept the pieces into the trash, washed my hands, and felt something old and weary fall away. I called Rowan. He answered on the second ring. I'm here. You'll never guess who visited. Someone delivering flowers, he teased. I laughed. Victoria Ashford. With a $50,000 gift. I don't think she enjoyed how I declined. His warm chuckle drifted through the line. I'm proud of you. Many people would have taken the money and called it practical. But you're different. I just don't want my life bargained away anymore, I said quietly. Not by anyone. Then let's make sure it never happens again, he said. Come to my office this afternoon. I want you to meet Whitmore Capital's attorney. Not for trouble, for opportunity. Some things deserve to be rewritten by the people who were overlooked. I hesitated. Are you sure? I've never even been in a law office. I'm sure, he said gently. And I want you beside me. Not for revenge, so we can close the old chapters. I looked out at the yard, morning sunlight catching Harold's rose bushes. All right, I said softly. I'll come. After Daniel hung up, I sat by the window, watching the garden soak in the first sweep of morning sun. The roses were open and heavy with scent, drifting into the room and blending with the faint trace of Earl Grey still on the table. I thought of Rowan, my Rowan, who'd once told me that self-respect isn't proven in speeches. It's revealed in the moment we refuse an easy surrender. And today, for the first time in years, I'd chosen myself. Not because of anger, but because I finally wanted to be free in this small house, framed by a rose garden no one could put a price on. Outside, the clouds thinned until sunlight poured across the tea table, catching on the torn scraps of the old check. They glimmered like small flecks of a beginning I wasn't expecting. That afternoon, I went to Hale and Alder Capital as promised. The tower rose over downtown Chicago, glass, steel, and sharp geometry, reminding anyone who walked past that real power never shouts. It simply stands taller. Sebastian Hale met me in the lobby, in the charcoal suit he always wore with a deep navy tie. When he saw me, something softened in his eyes, encouragement, steadiness, and a quiet respect I didn't think I'd ever earn in a place like this. You're here, he said. Lila's waiting upstairs. The 27th floor conference room was trimmed with cherry wood and soft amber lighting. A woman at the head of the table rose as we entered. Lila Ashford, mid-40s, sharp eyes behind delicate glasses, the kind of lawyer who understood both the letter and the heartbeat of a case. Mrs. Hart, she said, shaking my hand. I've reviewed everything Mr. Hale sent over. I believe you should see what we're dealing with. A thick file lay open, tabbed with blue and red markers. On her laptop, a spreadsheet glowed with financial ratios and risk maps, but Lila walked me through it slowly, with the patience of someone who respected the person behind the numbers. Victoria Ashford Holdings is running dangerously high leverage, she said. In plain terms, they borrowed more than they can survive over the next 18 months. And their entire operation depends on the building your husband once helped finance, now fully controlled by Hale and Alder. My breath steadied. If we terminate their lease, they'll have to relocate an entire staff. Equipment. Client contracts. A move like that will cost well over $200,000, not counting the hit to their reputation. Sebastian sat beside me, fingers folded, watching my face as if asking silently, "Are you ready to let them taste what they thought you'd swallow forever?" There are two options, Lila continued. Option A, you end the lease immediately. The rustle of paper was crisp and final. Option B, we offer them a renewal, on our terms. She slid a document toward me. Rent increases by 18%. 3-year term instead of 10. And more importantly, an ethics compliance clause. I lifted an eyebrow. An ethics clause. Sebastian gave a small nod. Lila pressed on. Yes. They must complete 4 public actions to keep the lease. Her voice stayed clear as glass. 1. A public apology to Mrs. Evelyn Hart on their official website and 2 Chicago business papers. 2. A formal commitment to respectful conduct toward older adults. 3. Annual contributions to the Chicago Elder Dignity Fund, overseen by Hale and Alder. And 4. The Rowan Hart Memorial Scholarship, 5 years, $10,000 each year, for disadvantaged construction students. The room went quiet. Seeing Rowan's name in print loosened something deep in my chest. A tribute he deserved, one I never imagined I'd have the strength to claim. What if they refuse? I asked. Then the lease terminates 72 hours after they receive the proposal, Lila said calmly. No courtroom. No drama. We shut access and reclaim the space. I looked at Sebastian. His expression was steady, almost gentle. Sometimes justice doesn't need punishment, he said quietly. It just needs consequences. For a long moment, I thought of Victoria, her cold smile, the dismissive tone she wrapped around me like a chain. I remembered sitting in the last row at the wedding, hands trembling while no one cared. And now I had a chance, not to humiliate her, but to make them finally acknowledge what they'd done. I'll sign, I said. Sebastian gave a single nod. Add her as a co-signer, he told Lila. This is her story to close. When Lila left, Sebastian stayed behind. I don't want you to think this is vengeance, he said softly. It's accountability. And you deserve to see the difference. I breathed out. I don't want revenge, Seb. I just want them to know they can't walk over people and pretend it was nothing. That, he said, is why this is the right path. Outside, the wind tugged at my hair as I stepped onto the street. A strange calm settled over me, not triumph, just a quiet exhale I'd been holding for far too long. When I returned home at dusk, I lit a candle in front of Rowan's photo. His smile glowed through the flickering light. I protected myself today, I whispered. And I protected your name. The flame trembled, washing my hands in soft gold. Outside, the Lake Michigan breeze carried the scent of roses, the scent Rowan loved most. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing where I was meant to be, upright, not bowed. 2 days after the proposal went out, my phone buzzed non-stop. Daniel's name filled the screen. The 3rd call in 10 minutes. When I finally answered, his voice was tight and frantic. Mom, please, you need to tell Mr. Hale to stop this. It's blackmail. The curtain swayed in the soft breeze. The morning sun poured across the table. No, Daniel, I said quietly. These are consequences. They're forcing us to apologize publicly. And the scholarship, it'll crush the company. I'm doing this for our family's dignity. Yours too. Dignity? I repeated softly. Where was yours when I sat in row 14? Silence. Heavy. Long. After a while, he said, breath ragged, I just want to make a deal. Tell me what you want. Money or something. I let out a tired, humorless laugh. A deal? Daniel, I don't need a deal. I just need you to choose a side. What side? Between the people who humiliated me, and the mother who raised you. Silence stretched, so long I thought the call had dropped. His voice finally returned, cracked and almost childlike. I don't know what to say. Then don't, I said gently. Think. I paused. Because for the first time in your life, you can't bargain with my self-respect. I was about to hang up, but another memory rose. When you were 8, I whispered, you promised you'd never let anyone make me cry. On your wedding day, you watched. Another long silence. Heavy enough to break something inside both of us. I hope you choose what's right, I said softly. But I can't wait forever. I ended the call. Later that afternoon, I met Sebastian at an art gallery in River North. No negotiations, no tension, just two people walking among canvases. He wanted me to choose a painting for the penthouse his firm was finishing. My first instinct was to say, you pick. Old habits. But instead, I stopped in front of a canvas of soft blues and whites, the sky after a long storm. This one, I said. It makes me feel like I can breathe. Sebastian smiled. Rowan would agree. I smiled back. He'd say it shows too much dust. But yes, he'd agree. It felt strange, choosing something without fear of being judged. Strange and wonderful. By the time I got home, twilight had settled. My phone pinged. Daniel, I need time. I stared at the message. No anger. No joy. Just stillness. So do I typed back. But the clock is running. That night, I brewed lavender tea and opened Rowan's old notebook. His handwriting danced across the yellowed page. To live is to know when to say, enough, especially when no one expects you to. I rested my hand over the words and let the wind from the lake move through the room. For the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. No row 14. No cold smirk from Victoria. No downcast eyes from Daniel. Only me, Evelyn Hart, at peace in a small Chicago house, knowing that when dawn came, nothing and no one could take my self-respect again. On the third morning, I woke early. Light spilled like milk through the curtains. Hour 71. Less than an hour before their deadline expired. I was steeping tea when my phone rang. Evelyn, put it on speaker, Sebastian said. You should hear this. A new voice came on, firm, polished, but shaken. Mr. Hale, said Richard Devon, chairman of Victoria's firm, now renamed under her direction. We're calling to confirm we accept all terms. A pause. Including the public apology, the contributions, and the scholarship. We'll sign today. Sebastian didn't gloat. His voice stayed calm. Good. On time. 4 words. The game was done. Devon cleared his throat. We hope this resolves everything. The only person who needed resolution, Sebastian replied, has already stood up for herself. The rest is just paperwork. He hung up. The room fell very still. I stood by the tea, hands trembling, not from triumph, but from the realization that nothing would be hidden anymore. The insults. The whispers. The humiliation. All of it would finally be written down, acknowledged, and made public. Sebastian touched my shoulder gently. You okay? I breathed deep. I'm not scared, I said. Just, it feels like I'm stepping through a door I never believed I was allowed to open. And for the first time in decades, I knew I wouldn't close it again. Sebastian's voice was steady, a low warmth against the tension in my chest. You're not walking into this alone, Evelyn. Lila confirmed the apology timing. Tomorrow night, during the Chicago Children's fundraiser at the Lakeshore Country Club. Devon Realty is the lead sponsor. They want the announcement on stage. I blinked. In the middle of a fundraiser. Exactly, he said. They want to frame it as corporate responsibility. For me, it's fitting, owning their wrongs in the same place they like to shine. I let that sit, then asked quietly, do you really think I should go? Sebastian met my eyes, firm but kind. I think you've spent too many years listening to other people talk over your story. This time, you show up for it. A slow breath slipped out of me. A strange blend of nerves and resolve settled in my spine. Then I'll go, I said. It's time. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Lila Ashford. The final agreement is signed. They sent the scan. Richard Devon will read the apology tomorrow. Media confirmed. I stared at the words until they blurred. This wasn't revenge. It was truth made visible, a kind of justice America often leans on, consequences written plainly, in public, where everyone can see. Later, while clearing the table, another message appeared. Daniel, Mom, I'll be there for the announcement. I think I need to hear it myself. I read it twice, feeling something warm flicker beneath all the caution. A part of me wanted to fold him into my arms. Another part whispered, not yet, Evelyn. Not before he shows he understands. I typed back, thank you for telling me. Then I set the phone down and looked at the small framed photo of Harold. His smile seemed steady enough to hold me upright. That night, I took out the black dress he once admired. Evelyn, you look like a woman who knows her worth, he'd said at our 25th anniversary. The fabric was softer now, but it still fit. I pressed it carefully, hung it in the lamplight, then sat before the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't smooth-faced anymore, but her eyes were clear. I whispered, not the woman in the last row anymore. Before bed, a text from Sebastian appeared. I'll pick you up at 6. I replied, bring the contract. I want to see it in our hands. His answer came in seconds. It'll be there. And so will I. I fell asleep feeling something close to peace. The next evening, the sky over Chicago stretched clean and bright. Lake Michigan glimmered like metal. As Sebastian pulled up to the country club, luxury cars slid through the gates like a parade. Staff in crisp uniforms moved with rehearsed grace. But inside me, everything felt new. I wasn't attending as the quiet mother in the back row. I was arriving as myself. Inside the main hall, the chandeliers scattered light across polished floors. Jazz curled through the air. Faces turned when we entered, people who once whispered about my old dress, people who had shaken Richard Devon's hand with more eagerness than sense. Their eyes held something unfamiliar now, caution. A staff member guided us near the front, close to the press row. I saw Daniel seated nearby, shoulders drawn tight, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Beside him, Victoria, the daughter-in-law who had once smirked at my thrift store dress, looked polished but pale, the slightest tremor in her jaw. At 7 p.m., the lights dimmed. The host announced a moment of accountability. Then Richard Devon stepped to the microphone. His voice was composed, but the strain showed. Tonight, on behalf of Devon Realty, we make a public apology to Mrs. Evelyn Hart, who was treated with disrespect by a member of our family. He paused, glancing toward the front row. Victoria rose. Not a wedding aisle this time. No triumphant music. Just silence and cameras. Her voice wavered. I am Victoria Ashford Devon. At my wedding, I said Evelyn Hart's lack of wealth would embarrass us. I placed her in the last row near the service area. I acted with arrogance and cruelty. A ripple of shock moved through the room. The kind that spreads when people realize the truth is heavier than gossip. Victoria continued, voice cracking. I understand now that dignity isn't about money. It's about how you treat people. Mrs. Hart, I'm sorry. I was small. I stood slowly and accepted the handheld mic. I didn't look at the audience. I looked only at her, the woman who had made me feel invisible. I acknowledge your apology, I said, my voice steady. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acknowledgement. Because today, at least, we're being honest. Victoria's shoulders shook. Tears hit her paper. I turned to Daniel. His eyes were brimming, not with shame alone, but with recognition. He finally saw me. Applause rose, soft but sincere. A turning of a tide. A whisper behind me carried through the hush. Is that her? The mother they put in the last row. She looks stronger than all of them, someone murmured back. After the event, Sebastian and I stepped out into the night. The golf course lights glowed like fireflies. A reporter hurried toward us. Mrs. Hart, any final words? I stopped. Silence from the vulnerable is what lets the powerful grow careless. But when the vulnerable finally speak, everybody listens. I walked on, not glancing back. In the car, Sebastian squeezed my hand. You okay? I nodded. Better than I thought I'd be. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. Daniel, Mom, can we talk? I felt no anger. Just the calm of someone who'd carried her weight and finally put it down. My reply was simple, tomorrow. Come as you are. Back home, I stood before the mirror again. The reflection staring back at me wasn't bowed or ashamed. I saw Evelyn Hart, silver-haired, clear-eyed, unbroken. The next morning, mist blurred the garden as a modest car pulled up. Daniel stepped out alone. No Victoria. No pretense. He looked tired, hollowed out by his own choices. When I opened the door, he managed a quiet, "Hi, Mom." Come in, I said. We sat in the living room, steam rising from untouched tea. He studied Harold's photos and the well-worn shelves, things he'd once brushed past. Mom, his voice was raw. I'm sorry. Not rushed. Not rehearsed. A beginning. I waited. I was under pressure, he said. Trying to keep up appearances, stay in the right circles, impress Victoria, impress her family. I was so afraid of looking small that I treated the person who raised me like she didn't matter. I let him speak. I forgot you, he whispered. I forgot myself. I answered quietly, Daniel, respect isn't decoration for public places. It's who you are when no one applauds. No one ever fell by being kind. But plenty fall by forgetting kindness. He nodded, eyes damp. I want to change. I'm afraid you'll never forgive me. Forgiveness isn't a door you kick open, I said softly. It's one you earn. But if you want to try, I won't close it. Hope flickered across his face. I need two things from you, I continued. Don't call me out of duty, call because you care. And next time we sit at a family table, I'm not in the back. I sit beside you. I promise, he whispered. Because I want to. Later, an email arrived from Lila. The Harold Hart Scholarship is fully executed. Funding received. Harold's name, my Harold, now lived in a way that would help young people build futures he'd once dreamed of. I whispered, You're seen, my love. In the evening, another message came. Victoria, Mrs. Hart, I want to meet. Not about the company. About us. I typed back, not yet. When I'm ready. Then I put the phone away. A few days later, Sebastian brought me to the top floor of Whitmore Tower, glass and sunlight stretching over the city. He motioned toward the open space. This will be for the community. Art, education, programs. Take a look. Tell me what you'd want here. I walked slowly, the view widening with each step. Something warm filled my chest. I want a reading corner, I said, for kids on the south side. Some can't reach a library easily. But they still deserve stories. Sebastian smiled, soft and certain. Then we'll build it. Perfect idea. I'll put you in charge of that part, Seb said. Let's call it the Harold and Evelyn Reading Corner. How does that sound? The words hit me with a warmth so deep I couldn't speak for a moment. Are you sure? Sure, he said. A building can impress people by being tall, but it earns its worth by having a heart. Today, you gave this one a pulse. Later that evening, as the last stretch of sunset folded behind the skyline, we drove quietly toward my neighborhood. The gold light made the city look softer, almost kind. Seb's voice broke the silence. In October, I'll need to spend a few weeks in Italy for a project in Tuscany. Will you come with me? I let out a startled laugh. Italy? I haven't left Chicago in at least 10 years. He didn't tease. Then it's time. Not to run, not to escape. Just to finally live without fear. That word hovered between us. Fear. I had carried it like luggage I forgot how to set down, fear of judgment, fear of losing people, fear of being alone. But as the traffic lights blinked on, it occurred to me that most fears dissolve the moment you take one honest step forward. I'll go, I said quietly, but with certainty. Seb squeezed my hand once. I knew you'd say that. That night in my room, the lamp glowing softly against the walls, I took a blank page and wrote to myself, nothing polished, nothing to prove. I lived too many years swallowing my voice. But today, I remembered that worth isn't handed out like an award, it's claimed. And I claim mine. I folded the page and slipped it into the weathered notebook where Harold used to jot down the roses he wanted to plant each spring. Outside, the wind moved through the garden, carrying that faint sweetness of fall. I stood by the window for a long time, knowing something inside me had finally shifted. 3 weeks after the apology, a bouquet appeared at my door, white lilies arranged with care. The note was simple. Hoping for peace. Patricia Devon. The flowers were beautiful, elegant, distant. I held them to my chest for a moment, then called the pediatric nurses at the children's hospital where Harold once funded a little music room. I'd like to have these sent to your unit, I said. From a mother who wants to thank people who lead with kindness. When they agreed, I felt something loosen in my chest, like a knot quietly undoing itself. That afternoon, an email from Lila Ashford arrived. Devon Reeland's community commitments were completed for the first year, the scholarship fund, the service programs, the support for the South Side Youth Center. All on schedule. I read every line twice. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about fairness being honored, about people doing the work instead of simply offering words. I imagined the scholarship students seeing Harold's name, the kids in the neighborhood flipping open new books, the reading corner filled with warmth. It felt like a legacy stitched back together, not perfect, but honest. On Friday evening, Daniel called. Mom, I'd like to invite you to dinner. Just family. His voice was steady, but careful, like someone rebuilding a bridge one plank at a time. I arrived at dusk. The house glowed with soft light, calm and warm. When I stepped into the dining room, I froze for a moment. The table was set beautifully, and my seat was placed not at the end, not tucked away, but directly in the center. Daniel pulled out my chair. This is yours, Mom. I want you exactly here. Across from me, an empty chair held a single white rose looped onto the back. Daniel's voice softened. Dad should be here too. Even if it's just a flower. My breath caught. I nodded. Your father always said a home is only truly strong when everyone is treated with honor. Dinner was nothing extravagant, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the kind of red wine Harold would swirl thoughtfully before sipping. But the laughter, shy at first, then easy, filled the room the way peace fills a tired soul. For the first time in years, I ate without bracing myself. When the dishes were cleared, Seb leaned toward me, his tone playful but gentle. For the next 20 years, let's write something better. Together. I smiled. All right. But this time, I'm choosing the title. He chuckled and squeezed my hand. On the drive home, I thought about how far I'd come, from being placed in row 14 by the service door to standing in the center of my own life. No one lifted me there. I walked every step myself. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a switch. It's a slow door that opens only when people show they've changed for real, not just through apologies, but through actions repeated long enough to become truth. Later that night, a message from Victoria Ashford Devon lit my phone. Evelyn, I read the article about the Harold Carter Scholarship. I understand now. If you allow it, I'd like to start again. I typed. The door opens when you're ready to live differently. Not sooner. Then I set the phone aside. On my table lay my passport, a fresh travel journal, and a plane ticket to Tuscany. Seb had already texted earlier. I'll meet you at the Florence airport. From there, our new chapter begins. I packed slowly, thoughtfully, touched each item with intention. Chicago wasn't a cage anymore. It had become the place where I reclaimed my voice. I opened the window. October air drifted in, cool, clean, promising something new. The streetlights reflected in the glass, illuminating my face. I no longer saw the woman who sat in the last row, trying not to be noticed. I saw Evelyn Hart, steady, self-possessed, no longer shrinking, no longer waiting for permission to take her place. Thank you for walking this road with me. Maybe you've sat on the sidelines too, pushed aside by someone who thought your worth was negotiable. But if you're still here, still listening, I believe you've already stood up from the place they tried to keep you. I want to hear your story. Where in the world are you watching from? Have you ever had that moment when you finally whispered to yourself, I matter? Share it in the comments. Someone who feels small tonight may find courage in your words. And if you want to keep going with me into stories of healing, redemption, and dignity reclaimed, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Not just for me, for everyone who needs a reminder that being overlooked is not the same as being undeserving. I'll see you in the next story, where another woman is slowly learning how to smile again after the storm.